Begin.
We must ensure that the rights of all citizens are respected and always aim to protect the public from the threat of violence by illegal gun owners, especially gangs. Massive amendments were introduced and then they were withdrawn. Gun owners and indigenous leaders both expressed significant concerns. Ultimately, I believe this bill is somewhat flawed and has potential to cause challenges for law-abiding gun owners. Targeting criminal behavior should be our focus, and I'm particularly concerned about those who smuggle guns into Canada. We should all agree that illegal firearms coming across the border are a problem. We won't solve gun violence simply by banning automatic weapons or handguns. I believe that bans alone will not solve the problem.
Target acquired.
Bill, second reading. Projet de loi, deuxième lecture, numéro 1, C21.
Senator Klyne.
Colleagues, I rise to speak to Bill C-21. This legislation has been the subject of intense debate, both in Parliament and in the media, and I want to share on the record my thoughts on the bill and discuss some concerns that likely represent the views of many people who have watched the debate unfold. By speaking of this bill, I appreciate that I'm wading into one of the most controversial and divisive topics as we can discuss as legislators: firearms laws in Canada. I won't spend much time debating the merits of owning firearms, nor will I spend a lot of time sharing my views about the various social and political factors that are often found at the heart of this debate. My goal is simply to speak on the components of Bill C-21 that I think could use some work and touch on some of the shortcomings that I believe have hindered the bill's legislative process. I will start by acknowledging what I believe C-21 does right. I appreciate that the bill acknowledges many of the new realities are in the fight against smuggled and illegal weapons. Firearms have changed a lot since they were first invented. The guns that were used by soldiers, hunters, and farmers in the 1800s bear little resemblance to the firearms we use today. Today's firearms are far more powerful and they are manufactured differently. In fact, firearms manufacturing has changed dramatically, with 3D printers helping to lead the charge. We're all familiar with 3D printers and the impressive output they can turn out. Unfortunately, the use of these printers in the manufacturing of firearms or components for firearms and the subsequent rise of ghost guns has become a significant cause for concern, particularly in large urban centres. I'm pleased that Bill C-21 is taking steps to address this issue, and I was inspired to learn that all parties in the other place share this particular concern. On a similar note, the introduction of red flag and yellow flag laws is a sensible approach that I believe will help remove firearms from situations where violence may occur. Not all senators will agree on this legislation, but one thing we all agree on is that we need to protect the public, and particularly vulnerable populations, from the threat of violence. I believe red and yellow flag laws are a positive step in the right direction. Senator Youssef already spoke about red flag and yellow flag laws in his sponsor speech. I won't dwell on the point other than to note that empowering the justice system to proactively take steps to protect victims from gun violence makes sense, and I think the introduction of these laws will help us move closer to the desired results. Of course, we must ensure that the rights of all citizens are respected and that these laws should be used carefully and always aim to protect the public from the threat of violence by illegal gun owners, violence-prone individuals, especially gangs and generally gun owners or prospective gun owners exhibiting traits of instability verging on doing harm to themselves or others. Now I will speak to some of my concerns with the bill. I believe Bill C-21 is well intended, but its legislative process has been the subject of much controversy. Massive amendments were introduced and then they were withdrawn. Gun owners and indigenous leaders both expressed significant concerns. Sadly, the debate became poisoned in the public sphere, particularly in rural Canada. So I'll try to keep my remarks concise and free of rhetoric. Ultimately, I believe this bill is somewhat flawed and has potential to cause challenges for law-abiding gun owners. Targeting criminal behavior should be our focus, and I'm particularly concerned about those who smuggle guns into Canada. No matter one's opinion on this specific bill, we should all agree that illegal firearms coming across the border are a problem. I believe we need stronger gun laws on smuggling with criminal sentences that can serve as a deterrent. And we need to invest in stronger border patrols to stop the flow of illegal handguns. As we know, Bill C-21 proposes to increase the maximum penalty from 10 to 14 years imprisonment for certain firearms-related offenses, including smuggling and trafficking. To my mind, that's a good start, but I wonder if a 4-year increase in the maximum sentence will be enough of a deterrent for those who are already smuggling guns into Canada. Is this increase in the maximum sentence, and I underscore that's maximum, not minimum, is it deterrent enough to deter this behavior and make a noticeable dent in the number of guns that smugglers bring into Canada? Frankly, I'm not convinced. Yes, as I understand it, the 14-year maximum sentence is the last stop. I should say, yet I understand that the 14-year maximum sentence is the last stop before you get to life sentence. Perhaps it should be 14 years with no chance of parole without participating in a substantial rehabilitation program that results in a substantial turnaround and evaluation of being unlikely to reoffend. Over the last couple of years, senators have debated the concept of mandatory minimum sentences. Bill C-5, which was passed last year by Parliament, removed mandatory minimum penalties for many criminal offences, but it did not remove minimum penalties for all firearms-related offences, such as the minimum mandatory punishments for certain offences where a restricted or prohibited firearm is used. Since then, further debate has arisen over the impact of removing mandatory minimums and its subsequent effect on crime. Should we reimpose minimum mandatory penalties for all gun crimes? I don't know the answer to that question, but I am not convinced that extending the maximum sentence for gun trafficking by a few years will help solve the problems we are facing without an effective rehabilitation program that is audited for its implementation, execution, and success rate. The government has acknowledged that no one program or public initiative will solve the problem of gun violence by itself. To me, that's both an accurate and reasonable argument. We won't solve gun violence simply by banning automatic weapons or handguns. Some may argue that bans are a critical component of solving the issue, but I believe that bans alone will not solve the problem. We must address the socioeconomic factors that lead to gun violence, the same way we must address the mental health issues that, if left unaddressed, are likely to lead to a person to violence. We also must crack down on gangs. Gangs have been at the epicenter of gun violence in Canada for decades. The level of violence has ebbed and flowed throughout the years, but we've never quite managed to eliminate gangs, despite the very efforts of law enforcement, governments, and society at large. We need to double down. Gang violence needs to be tackled with determination. Otherwise, we will continue to have to deal with the same issues plaguing our communities. I'm pleased the Minister of Public Safety announced in May that the federal government will spend $390 million over 5 years to help provinces crack down on gang violence. That's a good start, but we need to be consistent on this issue over a long period if we want to make true progress. I also want to touch on how Bill C-21 impacts Indigenous peoples. As with any bill we consider in this chamber, the rights of Indigenous nations and individuals must be respected. That means consulting with Indigenous peoples and ensuring their rights are respected. This is a sacred obligation and one that I take very seriously. We saw the controversy that arose a few months ago when the federal government introduced amendments to the bill at the committee stage in the other place, and Indigenous organizations spoke out. I appreciate that Bill C-21 includes a provision which clarifies that nothing in the legislation abrogates or derogates from the rights of Indigenous peoples. But I believe the government should have done a much better job of conducting advanced consultations with Indigenous leaders. The Assembly of First Nations even voted to publicly oppose the bill when the government introduced controversial amendments. And the AFN also expressed their concern that long guns traditionally used by their people were being targeted. I'm satisfied that the government withdrew those controversial amendments, but effective advance consultation earlier in the process would likely have been beneficial for all involved. They may have even discovered some alternative solutions that could have led to breakthrough policies. I do want to share that I was struck by Senator Couture's speech and his comments on the connection between firearms and suicide. It's no secret that firearms are often used as the instrument of choice when a person chooses to end their life. That's a sad reality we must contend with. Senator Couture noted in his speech that a recent study found that both men and women who own handguns were more likely to die of self-inflicted gunshots. Is Bill C-21 the answer to reducing incidents of gun-related suicide in Canada? I cannot definitely provide an answer to that question, but I echo Senator Couture's call that this issue should be studied further. There's another concern I'd like to address. To the best of my knowledge, the federal government does not have a dedicated anonymous phone line or online tip system that the public can use to confidentially report illegal gun ownership or to report gun owners exhibiting concerning behavior. Of course, there are services such as Crime Stoppers that can be used, but a dedicated system for gun crimes or potential gun crimes would be helpful in this area of mass shootings. We have dedicated anonymous tip lines for reporting drunk driving, so why can't we do the same for gun crimes? For me, this deserves consideration, and I wish a similar system could have been considered in the formulation of Bill C-21. Colleagues, Bill C-21 has been the subject of much debate, not just here in Parliament, but in the media and in the homes of gun owners and non-gun owners alike. That's healthy and a hallmark of our democracy. Unfortunately, the narrative surrounding this bill and others like it has at times led to deviation from the norms of a grounded democracy. No matter their opinion, people feel strongly about firearms, and I understand why. I hope that providing some measured concerns with this bill, senators will be able to appreciate the challenges and possible alternatives for consideration with this legislation. And hopefully, I have provided some food for thought in those regards. Firearms will always be controversial. We should debate the merits of gun laws in a fair, open, and honest manner, with respect for dialogue in our democracy, no matter our individual positions or beliefs on this issue. I look for more debate to come. Thank you, merci, and haike te taminen.
Senator Plett, you have a question?
I have one question for Senator Klyne, if he would take it.
Thank
you, Senator Klyne. Thank you for your speech. Just one question, and the reason I'm asking it is you did raise the particular issue of extending the maximum penalties from 10 years to 14 years. Would it surprise you, Senator Klyne, if I told you that yesterday at my critics briefing, we asked the officials about how often the 10-year maximum had even applied, because we were questioning what value is there to put 14 years. They said that as far as they knew, there was only one recorded incident ever where the 10-year maximum had been handed out. So were you aware of that? And in light of that, how do you feel about what value is a maximum when already the maximum isn't being used now?
Senator Klyne.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't know that I was in the same meeting, but I did hear that as well. And I think that it should be cause for a study in that regard. Like, what is the deterrent? And why, if 10 years isn't enough, is 14 enough? And what do we need to do to make that a deterrent? Enough to really clamp down and start making some inroad and progress on this gun smuggling and other illegal firearm offenses. As I said in my speech, it's the last stop before a life sentence. So what is it going to take? And I think that we need to do some education around this, potentially with the judicial system, and make sure that we lean into this with more bravo and brevity on these gun sentences and take it to the max. I think that if the more we allow this to happen without a strong deterrent, like the 14 years, more prone it's going to happen. There needs to be a deterrent, and I think it's got to be pain. Pain is the strongest or best leverage against a deterrent here. And so if they don't feel the pain, we may not catch their attention. So I think that probably deserves further study and understanding of the behaviors of why we continue to to commit these crimes, but also how do we make sure that we implement and execute the justice that's available to us to serve that purpose.
Supplementaries?
Please, just one supplementary. Senator Klyne, and of course it's well known that our party, I believe, is a party that's tough on crime, even though the Liberals occasionally pretend that they are. But they repealed a number of the mandatory minimum laws that we had in place before. Would you not agree that a mandatory minimum would be better, would be more effective than increasing a maximum when that maximum will never be handed out anyway?
Senator Klyne, about 25 seconds left.
24, 23. It's that's a quandary for me as well. I would pose the same question, and it's again something that I think needs to be studied at committee.
Senator Martin.
I move the adjournment of the debate.
It is moved by the Honourable Senator Martin, seconded by the Honourable Senator Marshall, that further debate be adjourned until the next sitting of the Senate. Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion? Carried. Adopté.
Perfect.